In the past few weeks, I've made my entire set of Geometry Dash icons hyper-realistic, and in the last video, there were a ton of people asking if I could do it for them as well. But out of all these comments, one stood out to me the most. Now, Lation makes great videos, and I've been watching him for quite a while, so it came as a surprise to me when he commented, offering an obscene amount of money if I were able to make his icons realistic. Now, of course, as a college kid, that instantly set off the alarm bells for me. Like, money? I can spend money? So of course I had a counter offer ready. I said no money. I'm not gonna do it for money. I don't wanna make icons for money. Why would I do that? So instead I'm just gonna make the icons for free and I'll farm his reaction at the end of the video as payment.
Wow!
These icons are just perfect for this. Of course though, we have to start with the original game mode of Geometry Dash, the cube. So we're here in Photoshop and we gotta change this icon into a realistic face. Now first off, we're gonna need some teeth. This dog tooth will fit perfectly. Now we're also gonna need some beady eyes. And what animal has beadier eyes than a cat? I like this one because it really just stares into your soul. The icon also has a tongue right here. So we're gonna search that up, and this cat tongue is just too cute. Come on. Finally, I'm gonna need a skin texture. Yep, we're making a monster. God, that is just gross. Now who would I be if I didn't name my files? Drag them into Photoshop, and then we can start piecing this stuff together. I chose the cat's spiky tongue because it really has that monster feel, and I think it'll match the icon pretty well. And with it cut out, all I need to do is just hit warp, and then drag these points until the tongue area is filled out. And with a mask on our layer, if we hit Control I, we can then paint in where we want the tongue. Now we're gonna need this tooth. And while I select this, I'm gonna make sure to keep a lot of the gums here, because I think they're gonna add to the gross factor. And we all know that that is what I strive to do when I make icons. Now these teeth are very triangular, so I'm gonna go ahead and straighten this out. Just like that, we have a sharp tooth. Now if we make 4 of them, and shrink them down to their respective sizes, then we have a god-awful monstrosity. Of course, this is all I can do. I'm gonna warp the skin around this object, and then going back to liquefy once more, we can push in all the sides to add depth. It already looks like I've kind of folded the skin over the icon, but the magic comes in when we fill in the right area. Now I'm also going to liquefy the skin to wrap around this mouth. For the eyes, I'll just use the bloat tool. Alright, now that we finally have all the pieces in place, it's time to start shading. Now this is my favorite part because it's really going to make it look alive. But for the cat tongue, I'm going to make an exposure layer, and I like to turn up the gamma correction because it keeps the color. And with a low flow on our brush, we can paint in the areas that receive less light. Now the same goes for highlights. We can paint in where the light would hit on this tongue. Now for the back of this mouth, I'll just make it a lot darker, and then I'll paint on some of the bumpier areas. Now I'll add one final dark shadow where the tongue might collide with some of the skin. I gotta do a whole lot of shading on these teeth. Now in shading the outside skin, I need to keep in mind that the darker parts look deeper. Right here, it looks like the mouth is popping out more. I'm gonna make the bottom feel a bit more rounded. I'll do that by adding a soft shadow on the edges. Of course, we gotta add some shadows to these eyes. And while I'm finishing up shading, I wanna ask if you could just go down and hit the subscribe button. It only takes a few seconds, and you can always unsubscribe if you change your mind. I really do appreciate it though. Finally, I'm gonna add some highlights to this, starting with this little smirk here. But now it's time to make this icon Lation's. If you remember, Lation has it textured to where these eyes are angry. Of course, I gotta add that to this version, and push these eyes down to match the shape. And now that we have our very angry fella, the blue color seems to be in the eyes, and then the teeth and the tongue. I'm just gonna color those in, and then I'll make the skin white, make it a bit brighter. I'm just gonna add an exposure layer, and with a blend if, I can take that brightness out of the darker areas. And in the same bounds, I'm gonna make the brighter areas brighter, and the middle areas dark. And in areas where that doesn't make sense, I'm just gonna add a bit of a shadow. Before I make Lation's ship, I just want to mention that in the description, there's a download link for all the icons that look like this, where there's no extra colors attached. And with a few touch-ups, that's Lation's icon. Let's see what he thinks at the end of the video. So it's the next day, and you can tell because I am wearing a different shirt. But the ship, it's kind of reminding me of some phoenix or bird. So what better thing to do than get some feathers? And I'd say these are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just gonna rush through them real quick. I chose this for the wings, this eagle eye for, of course, the eye, and then for the body, I just chose these pink flamingo feathers, but I'll recolor them. And of course, I'll drag them into Photoshop. First, I'll put this eye in place. I'm just gonna liquefy it to fit that perfect circle. Now, that matches a lot better. You can just go ahead and fill in the back part of this phoenix. I'm gonna liquefy these feathers to go upwards a bit more. Some of these, I'm just gonna remove the stem, and then I can remake it facing the right direction. And I'll go ahead and finish up adding this depth. Now it feels good enough to go on to the next step. And that's gonna be taking the angel wings and putting them in place on top of the head. It's gonna take a lot of liquefy. Okay, that wasn't that much, to be honest. And after angling all these feathers how I want them to be, we have a nice full head of feathers. Let's put another wing on top of the area where our actual wing is. And now I'm gonna start shading. Start with an adjustment layer, and with an inverted mask, I can go ahead and paint in some shadows. Now the most important thing here is gonna be the separation of the front feathers and the back feathers. feathers. And we'll do that by making these back feathers a little darker. Of course, we'll also add shadows underneath these feathers. The higher up the feather is right here, the further the shadow should reach. And in areas like this, where the feather seems to be touching, we can just add a harder contact shadow. Now that I've shaded it all, you can see the huge difference that it makes. And we're just going to lay on a smooth highlight layer on top. It just adds a little bit more pop to the whole thing. And now I have to do it for all of these other parts, so wish me luck. This is going to take a second. So I've made it to this point, and I'm wondering how a feathered mouth would work. I feel like one tooth isn't going to do much. Doesn't matter, after adding some shading on this tooth, it's really starting to get some form here. Because it's such a bright surface, I also do want to add a bounce light on the edges though. And that really fixes the color of it for me. Alright, I've finally shaded every bit of this bird, phoenix thing, except for the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I can color it. Now with a little bit more form to the eye, we can add this teal color that we find in Lation's icons. This icon also has blue in the tooth. And instead of a hue and saturation layer, we're going to hit solid color, pick this color, and there we go. Next up is Lation's ball, which is pretty similar to his base icon. So we can take a lot of the images we used on this icon and transfer it over here. And I want to start out with these disgusting skin folds. One cool thing you might not know about the liquify tool is that there are different options on the left side. And one of them is the twirl clockwise tool. And I'm just gonna press down. And then I'll take this warp tool and I'll push the edges to wrap around the actual ball shape. So holding shift, we can go ahead and tap the corners with a layer mask. And after doing all of that, we can just hit G and then click on it to fill it in. I don't know why I've chosen to use the skin texture again, but it's at least going to be similar to the first icon. I'm going to take the cat eyes that we've already used. I'm going to flip this eye upside down because it kind of looks like the eyes are peeking over. Now we got to open this creepy mouth. And I'm wondering if I should just leave the skin on these teeth. Well, let's see how that will turn out. Kind of disgusting, but hey. And then I'll push around these pupils until they're the shape and angle that I want. I'm going to do my best to add some new reflections. It'll make a little more sense pertaining to where the light comes from. And we can add some extra fake reflections by just painting them in at the bottom. I'm going to sink in these edges with some shading just to make the eye pop out a little bit more. The mouth will look a lot better with some dark shading around it. Adding some bright highlights around these edges is really giving it some form. I'll add this beautiful tongue in. It'll add some highlights on top. And I'll make the eyes green for now just to match this one. Now, even though I do want this to look pretty similar to the original icon, it doesn't have any teeth. After recoloring the entire thing, we have 3 of our icons done. So the next icon is Lation's UFO. And if you look deep into the lore of this, it's just Stitch. It's just Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. First, I'm going to take a look at what kind of materials we're going to need. Stitch seems to have fur, big alien eyes, round teeth, and kind of bat ears. So what I'm going to do is search up fur, and this lion texture is good. I might just look up alien eyes, to be honest. These are disgusting, but I'll take them. I think dog teeth are round. This one's perfect. For now, the last thing is bat ears. This little fella looks awesome. Let's name these files and drag them into Photoshop. First thing I want to do is take this alien's eye. Normally, I would just warp the eye to fit this circular shape. But this time I'm going to leave it like this because it fits the eye of Stitch a little bit more. Now, I don't really like the reflection on this eye, so I'm going to do a little bit of magic and just cover it up. Of course, what that means though is that when we take it to the other side and flip it horizontally, we're going to need to paint in our own reflections in both of these eyes. And we can move on to adding these dog teeth, which I'm going to cut out individually using the pen tool. And once I've circled all of them, I can hit mask and then drag these teeth down here. Sticking with the theme of the eyes, I'm going to be a bit loose in conforming to the outline of the original icon. And I feel like that'll give us a better idea of the Stitch part of this UFO. The next thing I want to add is the ears. And as always, we can liquefy them to fit the backdrop a little bit more. And now we can start painting in this lion fur. I'm going to make it black and white and simply paint in the lines. Animals usually have their fur following the contour of their body shape. Now for the nose, I'm going to take inspiration from this image. I'm going to start with a solid fill layer, and I'm going to paint right over that nose. So we're going to use an exposure layer to add some shading, where we're going to need another exposure layer layer where we turn the exposure up and the gamma correction down. And I feel like I could use an oval brush, and with a low flow we can tap around. Now this already has some form in it, right? But to really make it complete, we have to go through and add subtle shading on all areas. This means that on the bottom right, we're going to draw in a nice dark shadow. And to make this a little less flat, I think Stitch would benefit from a little bounce light on the edge of his nose. So I'm just going to add some fur down here, and I feel like shading these, so I'm going to do that. Obviously, I should also probably make this fur blue. Stitch has some disgusting yellow teeth, so I'm just gonna tint him a little bit. The shading's looking cool and all, but I do want to add some deeper contact shadows next to things like the eyes. For this one, I'll use a hard brush, do that with the nose as well, and even these teeth on the bottom. But right now, it looks like this eye is protruding from the face. It'll make a lot more sense if I add a shadow around where the eye would be, give it some roundness by softening the edges, and then adding a highlight on the opposite end. And you can see when you zoom out that it looks like the eye is underneath the skin. Something that's good to know while drawing animals is that fur has a lot of black and white spots in it. And with this eye, it's going to wrap around the eyelid just a little bit. If we add these shadows that we just made on top, it already starts to come together. I'm going to copy and paste that to the other side. The next thing I want to do before moving on to the ears is add a highlight to the top of his head. Alright, now these ears obviously have to be blue. And after making these crevices darker, I can go ahead and move on to the highlights on top. So I'm sure at this point you already know the steps I'm going to take, so I'll go ahead and fast forward and figure out what to do with these horn shapes. Now I've made it to these horns, and what they remind me of is a rhino. I'm going to decide not to use this one, and instead I'll choose this black and white image, rename it, drag it into Photoshop, line it up with a background, and then put them behind the fur. And then with some shading and some highlights, we have our Stitch UFO. But of course Ladion's icon has different colors, so let's change that. And I think it would just be better if we made these brighter areas a bit brighter, and now this UFO fits in a little bit more with the other icons. So I'm going to go to bed because these take forever, and I'll get back to the next one in a bit. It's been a few days, and I'm sure you could tell because I have a different hairstyle now. And before we do these impossible ones, I'm going to start with this simple wave. Now for this one, I'm going to start by just shading. But to get a base, I'm going to open a solid color layer. The back is going to have a bit of a darker gray. With the second shading layer, I'll do a similar thing to the top here. But I'll make sure to add a bounce light to show that light is still coming from up there. I'll make sure to do the same thing for the bottom part. And then I'll add a bit of a harsher shadow coming from the top cone. And once we smooth it out a little bit, we're really starting to get some form on this. And I think just adding some darker shadows will allow us to move on to the highlights. So I'm definitely going to want to add a highlight on top, and I'll even add one in the middle here because it's starting to look a bit metallic, and I like that idea. Now, I think it would be pretty cool if we added another solid color layer, and adding a little selection to the background, we went ahead and added some depth. I'm gonna pick my favorite brushed metal texture. I kinda like this one because it has some grunge, and I'll drag it into Photoshop. By holding Alt on my keyboard, I can add a clipping mask, and with the liquify tool, I can just go ahead and shape this texture, and now I'll just repeat that process for the top of this thing. And if you think these are cool right now, just wait till you see them in game at the end of the video. I just realized that this icon has blue in the back, but luckily this is a smart object, so if I double click on it and I find a good ice texture, I can simply drag it on top, fit it to the area, and hit save. Now as long as I add it to this backside, a little recolor is all I need for this to be perfect. Next in the lineup is his robot. I think we're going to need some dinosaur textures, and a Stegosaurus would work well because of all of its spikes. Now I also want an eye for this dinosaur. This one looks good. It looks like we're going to find another use for that rhino because its ear is pretty similar. After renaming our files, you already know what we have to do. Drag it into Photoshop. And this time I want the rhino's ear. And we can hit mask and overlay it right on this robot. And next I want to put in this eye, which I'll just do a rough selection on for now. It looks a little whack, but of course we can make it fit a bit more with some liquify. Let's get this alligator skin texture. I think I'm gonna paint a separate layer for this mouth, but I don't want them to be perfectly separated, so I'm gonna use this mask and fade out the edge so that texture kind of merges in with this bottom layer here. And at that point, all I need to do is add some shading to this bottom jaw, and your head can just put it together as a perfect piece. I also want to sink in this eye with some shading. This will also help separate the head from the bottom jaw, and I'll add a highlight to the top, and that just adds some contrast to bring it forward. And seeing how well this rhino ear is gonna fit is starting to make me think that it might just be better for these horns to be from this rhino as well. And this time I'm gonna take this shorter horn. So now I'll put it into place and hit puppet warp, because now I can pin this top part and then drag the bottom right to set it up before I hit liquify. And when I mask this in, I'm gonna make sure that it's round and in perspective. All I have to do is add shading and highlights to these, so I'm gonna skip through all that. There are also these leg parts and feet, but I'll spare the details and just skip to the end product. Alright, I've made all those appendages, and before I recolor them, I'm gonna put them all into this form to see how they turned out. And I think that looks pretty cool. Time for these last two icons. These might be some of the coolest ones, so I'm excited to see how they turn out. Now this spider looks robotic to me. I love this skull shape, and I think the spikes add some form to this silhouette. So what I'm gonna do first is maybe even search for a metallic skull. Let's get the stupid AI images out of the way. And after a bit of searching, I've found this one. And I think if we cut off this bottom jaw, then we might have a winner. Now another thing we're gonna need is just some metal sheeting. And I don't want any brush metal, but I think something like this is gonna work best. These glowing eyes are kind of reminding me of the Terminator, and those kind of lights close up resemble traffic lights. So I'm gonna use this. And I want to make the parts in the legs glow too, so I'm gonna use this LED panel texture. Now I want to start by placing this skull. I don't want this bottom jaw here, and it's definitely gonna take a lot of warping to fix this shape. I'm gonna hit OK and see what that did. That's not as bad as I expected, and I think adding that traffic light inside his eyes is really gonna make it look cool. But first I actually want to bring back this metal skull and just take the texture from the top of his head so that we can kind of undo the damage that we did through liquefy. That worked pretty well. And now I want to insert those traffic light eyes. With an ellipse, I'm gonna select this area and mask it. I'm just going to place them in the eye sockets, then using another layer mask, I'm going to paint them back in where they should be. And the cool thing is that if I hit this chain, I can unlink the layer mask, and then I can move around this traffic light inside the eye. I'm going to repeat the process for the other eye. I think the glow's really going to look good shining against all these metal surfaces. But first, we're going to use this rough metal texture and just paint in these spikes. And you already know, we're just going to push the texture to form around the spikes. And I'm excited to start shading this, so let's just do it. I'm going to start with some soft shadows. I'd love to have more contrast. Not necessarily that much, but we'll fade it down in a second. And if light is hitting this corner here, then the shading might end up darker on this side of the spike. I'll add some highlights on the side, and we'll move on to shading this big skull. We're definitely going to need to add some shading to the gum area. And he looks pretty tired, so we're going to give him some eye bags. Something like this indent here is going to have a really dark inside, and it'll gradually fade to a brighter value as you get out of it. And I'll add some soft shading around the entire bottom right side before I move on to the top, which is going to have a few shadows due to these spikes. As the shadow gets further from the object, it gets softer, and it gets a lot lighter. Highlights are also very important though, and if we put them on top, you'll really get the sense that there's some sort of light coming from the top left. I'm also going to add some subtle shading to these lights, but in the layer styles for the exposure layer, I'm going to use a blend if. We're going to make it so that the shading only applies on the darker values. And I can do that by pinching off the brighter values on the underlying layer. And if I hold Alt and drag this little piece here, it'll make it a smoother transition. And now, no matter how dark I paint it, the brightest parts are still going to pop out just as well. Now I'm going to add a bright rim light against the edge. Also add these highlights in the middle. Now real quick, I'm going to do it to the other eye. Now my real favorite part, I'm going to add a solid color layer. Make it whatever color we want it to glow. We'll just use red for now. Now, if I slowly tap in some bright lights around these eyes, you can see that it adds glow in a natural way. But the thing that'll bring this together is a hue and saturation layer. And if I turn up the saturation and change the blending mode to screen, then I can go ahead and paint on these edges to get a more realistic looking glow. So I'm just going to go around the edges of the eyes and paint in light where I believe it'll reach. And now when we turn on the glow, it just adds that little bit of realism that we might have needed. Real quick, I'm going to throw together these legs. And now that I've finished those, I'm going to go ahead and recolor them. And now we have one more icon to make before we see what Lation thinks. Alright, let's finish this. The last icon we have to make is this Boo from Mario. And he looks like this, but also King Boo shares the darkness under the eyes. So I'm going to use these as reference. And instead of using any stock images, I'm going to do what I did with that one bomb robot. And I'm just going to shade it until it looks like a Mario render. I'm going to take this solid color layer, and I'll just make my brush the size of this Boo, and paint in his body shape. I'll add in this little tail, and his arms, and then I'll get these other extraneous parts like the tongue, those pearly whites, and thrusters apparently. And all of that combined leaves us with this. Now it may not look pretty now, but we can make something out of it. Now to start off, I'm just going to add in some shadows. And I'm sure you've seen by now that adding in shadows is the best way to make something feel 3D. Because really what depth is a difference between light and dark. And on a plain white character like this, the bounce light is going to be a tinted blue. I'm going to add a shadow around the entire character. And now when I put in these highlights, they'll actually show up. And I love this process because you can just see it coming into form after every brush stroke. Something I've noticed about the older renders is that the face is just plastered on. on. So I found this render of King Boo that does it a little differently, and I'm going to use that as the reference so it doesn't look tacky or out of place. So what I'll do is add a selection here, and with a new shading layer, I'm just going to add a bit of darkness under the eyes. Now that already looks pretty cool, but we're going to need to put the eyes underneath it. So I'm just going to mask the top of the pupils away. And these eyes don't seem to have much depth, but I think that it would be cool to make them a little 3D. I'm just going to shade it as if it was spherical, adding some highlights in the top that'll fade down to transparency below. But right now, those scrunched eyebrows kind of look like a flat PNG you just pasted on the sphere. So to make them pop out a little bit more, I'm going to give them their own shading. It's really starting to take its shape, and if I just lighten it up a little bit and then add some shadows underneath the eyes. Real quick, I'm just going to knock out the shading on these thrusters. And next I'll shade the inside of the mouth. Hi. I just kind of took a nap because college ruined my sleep schedule. Let's get back to it. Kind of forget what I was doing. It looks like I should be working on the edges of the mouth here. So that's what I'm gonna do. There should definitely be a shadow under the tongue. So it's gonna have a little dark outline here just to show the ridge on the top of the mouth. Yeah, that looks good. That looks good. That was genuine surprise there. I'll add another shadow at the top. I just need to add a white highlight at the bottom. Oh, I'm so tired. And then it has just a highlight down here. And then we'll make this a little bit less. And then highlights on the bottom right. That looks good enough for now. Let's just see if the teeth can make it better, you know? Sounded like a stock yawn. Yawn sound effect .mp3. Should I yap more? Comment. Leave a comment in the comment. Now, where would I see this tooth in front of the other one? Also, cool thing. We reached 110,000 subscribers. I was stuck on like 1 subscriber for years, so I'm pretty happy with that, I would say. Sometimes the light will reflect off of, let's say, this surface, and it'll end up hitting the edges. Is yapping still in style? Am I allowed to say that? If you're Generation Alpha, comment below. Tell me if you say the word yapping. I'm gonna add in the blue highlight as well. Yeah, that'll work. Add it right there. So all that's really left is this tongue. Let's go here. Let's add another tongue line, but harsher. We can fade out the edge, and then if we add shading to the whole thing, we also need a bounce light. You guessed it. I'm gonna put in a shadow that kind of references the top of this mouth here. All I really have to do is follow the contour of this tongue, and I want to redo the color here. And then when we add the highlights, it should work out. I'm liking how it looks now. I can work in a little more bounce light on the bottom. Now something I also want to do is add a solid color, turn it to screen, and I want to paint on these edges here. Now I have the shine for specifically those parts above the eyes, because I also want to add it around the eyes. And like that last one, I'm just going to tap around until there's a nice halo around his eyes. Now I'll go ahead and color this like Ladion's icon, make it blue. Perfect. That looks cool. That looks awesome, to be honest. But anyway, let's move on to what you've all been waiting for, Ladion's reaction to these actual icons.
I don't know why, but I'm honestly kind of nervous because I feel like it's going to be both me being amazed and also like horrified. We have horrors beyond comprehension.
Wait, what? I didn't know you could name it.
That's what I named my texture pack.
Okay, yep.
Horrors beyond comprehension. Here we go.
The skin is
Wow. Okay.
I love how out of place it looks in the menu. That's so funny.
I love the eyes. They're always like dilated. Like he's staring into my soul. I'm staring right back at it. I love him. Right, the ship. Here we go.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I just like this one, to be honest.
That's awesome. I always thought of that ship as like a bird, but like it kind of doesn't look like a bird.
The face has no beak, but he has a mouth, so it's like really confusing.
Yeah.
So I just put feathers over it. I guess he has a feathery mouth.
Okay, the ball. This one
The ball.
This could go many ways. Oh, he's drooling. He looks like he is caked out of his mind. All right, the UFO. Oh, okay. It's a goblin. I mean, it is a goblin. That's a goblin UFO.
It is. I've always thought of it as Stitch from Lilo and Stitch.
I think you just think of Stitch as a goblin, which, I mean, it is a goblin.
It is
I mean,
kind
look
of
at him. He's a goblin.
an alien type goblin. Wave you have as the default.
Yep.
So I mean, it works.
That's kind of my fault because that's the one that I wanted when 2.2 came out, but I didn't unlock it until like a week ago. All right, the robot. I saw in one of your videos you tried to make a spider, and it kind of like the legs were going crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how this is gonna look. Oh wow! I love the texture. Yeah, I always thought of this robot as like a rhinoceros, or actually, yeah, it actually might be a rhinoceros.
That's funny. I did use rhino horns for it too.
All right, the spider. Oh god. Whoa! Yeah. Oh wow!
I like this one a lot.
Oh, he is coming for me. He is coming for my soul. He looks like he's up to no good. Like, you know, he started off, you know, we had like these cute little feathery guys, and then we have death.
We got one more, and it's Boo.
Oh man, I'm not gonna lie. Wow, that's so cool. I was the most excited for this one just because I love the Boo swing. Wow, and then let's look at them all together.
What an icon set.
It's kind of like a story if you look at it, because you have like this cute little guy, and then it kind of goes all the way down until you see death itself as a spider.
So true, and then he turns into a ghost.
Let's play with him. Look at him go.
It just looks so out of place. I love it.
It's hard for me to focus just because I'm too busy looking at him. All right, here we go.
Death.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of sick.
It works.
Wait, why are the legs working on this one? I'm happy about that.
Here's this ship. That's awesome. Look at him go. Oh, the robot works too.
Yeah. Oh my god, I did it.
Wow. Okay, so those were amazing. Let's take a look at the swing.
Oh, he's red. Wait, that was sick.
Geometry Dash.
Geometry Dash.
Whoa, it's so
it's
cool.
so cool.
Look at him.
I love it.
Whoa, look at the ball. This is a surreal experience right now. This is actually surreal. It's similar but unfamiliar. Look at the robot, it's crazy.
It's alternate reality Geometry Dash.
I'm gonna do theory of everything so I can look at the UFO. Here we go. Look at him.
Look at him go.
Look at him. And you know, it's before we get to the robot and the spider, so it's like a cute and a wholesome icon set. Oh, the dome. I just noticed the dome.
The dome.
That's
yes,
cool.
It's a bubble.
Thank you so much for making this for me, man.
Of course.
I remember I commented on your video. I didn't actually expect you to do that.
I mean, you offered an obscene amount of money.
So, you know, I am gonna pay you, but just make sure to look at the back of the trunk. Do not tell the authorities, no matter what.
What are you saying? What are you talking about?
So thank you so much for this, man. That's crazy.
Of course, no problem. Say hi. Hey, it's me. Thank you for watching all the way through. Please subscribe to Lation. His videos are great, and I really liked his last one, the tribute to Geometry Dash. So thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.